Hudson Yards was supposed to prove that New York could build its own future. $25 billion. Glass towers rising above active train tracks. Luxury apartments. Corporate headquarters. High-end shopping. Public art, restaurants, parks, an observation deck, and a new subway station connecting it all to Manhattan. It was described as the largest private real estate development in American history, a completely new district built from the ground up, a city within a city. When Hudson Yards opened in March 2019, politicians, developers, celebrities, and business leaders celebrated it as a triumph. But only a few years later, the image had changed. Its signature attraction was repeatedly closed after tragedy. Its flagship department store disappeared after barely a year. Remote work drained life from its plazas. Luxury apartments struggled to justify their prices. Its cultural centerpiece faced financial pressure, and a major portion of the district remained unfinished. Hudson Yards did not physically collapse. The towers are still standing. What collapsed was the promise that $25 billion could instantly manufacture a successful Manhattan neighborhood. The story begins on the far west side, between approximately 30th and 34th Streets. For decades, this area was dominated by an enormous open-air rail yard operated by the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. The trains still had to move in and out of Manhattan, which meant the land could not simply be cleared and developed like a normal construction site. To build Hudson Yards, engineers first had to create an enormous platform above the working tracks. That platform alone cost roughly $3 billion. Above it, related companies and Oxford Properties planned approximately 18 million square feet of offices, homes, hotels, shops, restaurants, entertainment venues, and public spaces. The first phase would include several office towers, luxury residential buildings, the Equinox Hotel, a 7-story shopping center, an arts venue called The Shed, the Edge Observation Deck, and Vessel, the giant staircase sculpture that would become the district's visual symbol. A second phase was supposed to extend the development farther west, adding more offices, residences, public space, and a stronger connection to the Hudson River. The developers did not present Hudson Yards as just another group of skyscrapers. They called it a new neighborhood. It would transform an industrial edge of Manhattan into one of the most desirable addresses in the world. Major corporations would move in. Wealthy residents would buy apartments. Tourists would arrive from around the world. Workers would fill the restaurants and shops every weekday. The plan appeared convincing because large companies signed major leases before the district was complete. Coach, L'Oreal, SAP, KKR, Wells Fargo, and other powerful firms committed to the site. BlackRock later made 50 Hudson Yards its global headquarters. The buildings were expensive, but the tenants seemed to validate the project. Yet, Hudson Yards was never simply a private development. It depended heavily on public support. New York City created a special financing structure to fund the infrastructure required to make the area viable. The most important investment was the extension of the No. 7 subway line to a new station at 34th Street and 11th Avenue. That subway extension cost around $2.4 billion. Without it, Hudson Yards would have been isolated from much of Manhattan's transit network. The offices could not have attracted thousands of workers. The mall could not have depended on destination shoppers. The apartments and hotel would have been far less valuable. Public transportation did not merely improve Hudson Yards. It made Hudson Yards possible. Residential buildings in the area also benefited from property tax exemptions and other financial advantages. When infrastructure costs, tax reductions, and additional public contributions were calculated over several decades, critics estimated that the public support behind Hudson Yards reached close to $6 billion. That created an uncomfortable question. What did New York receive in return? Public investment in private development is common. Cities regularly spend money on roads, transit, utilities, and public spaces that encourage construction and economic activity. But Hudson Yards was marketed as proof of private enterprise, while taxpayers absorbed much of the risk required to unlock the site. In return, the city received a district dominated by luxury apartments, corporate offices, premium restaurants, expensive retail, and attractions designed largely for tourists and wealthy visitors. Affordable housing played only a limited role in the first phase. Many of the corporate tenants were not new employers arriving in New York. They were companies relocating from other Manhattan buildings. The city had helped finance one of the most expensive developments in history, yet much of the project remained inaccessible to ordinary New Yorkers. Then, the most recognizable symbol of Hudson Yards became its greatest public failure. Vessel was designed by Thomas Heatherwick as a massive interactive sculpture. It stood approximately 150 feet tall and contained 154 connected stairways, 80 landings, and around 2,500 steps. Visitors could climb through the structure and look out over the surrounding city from different levels. It was supposed to be a free public experience and the emotional center of the district. It cost approximately $200 million. At the opening, Related Companies chairman Stephen Ross compared its importance to the Eiffel Tower. But the design contained a serious vulnerability. The structure was built around openness. Its walkways and platforms offered unobstructed views, with relatively low barriers separating visitors from drops reaching more than 100 feet. Between 2020 and 2021, 4 people died by suicide after jumping from vessel. After the third death, the attraction was closed while the developer considered changes. It briefly reopened with a new rule requiring visitors to enter with another person. Then a fourth death occurred. Vessel closed again. The problem was not something that could be solved with a simple change in visitor policy. It was connected to the architecture itself. The openness that made the structure visually dramatic also made it dangerous during a mental health crisis. A monument designed to symbolize public connection became associated with tragedy, poor planning, and questions about why stronger physical protections had not been included from the beginning. When access eventually returned, the original concept had changed. The free, spontaneous public experience was replaced by greater control, safety barriers, ticketing, and restrictions. Vessel still exists, but it no longer represents what Hudson Yards promised in 2019. The same pattern appeared inside the shopping center. The shops at Hudson Yards opened as a 7-story luxury mall anchored by Neiman Marcus. The department store occupied a huge space and was expected to attract affluent New Yorkers, international tourists, office workers, and residents from the surrounding towers. But the mall opened during one of the worst possible periods for luxury brick-and-mortar retail. By 2019, online shopping had already transformed consumer behavior. Department stores were closing locations, losing customers, and struggling under enormous debt. Hudson Yards responded to this trend by opening an entirely new department store-centered shopping complex. The location created another problem. Traditional shopping districts benefit from passing pedestrians and established residential populations. Hudson Yards had almost neither. People did not accidentally walk into its mall while moving through an older neighborhood. They had to make a deliberate journey to reach it. Everyone entering the shops had chosen Hudson Yards as a destination. Then, in 2020, the pandemic shut down offices, tourism, restaurants, and retail. Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy and abandoned its Hudson Yards location after operating there for only around 14 months. The flagship tenant of a $25 billion development disappeared before the mall completed its second year. The shopping center survived, but it had to change its strategy. Luxury stores were replaced or supplemented by restaurants, experiential concepts, and more accessible retailers. That was the same strategy struggling malls across America had already been using. At Hudson Yards, however, it was happening inside a brand new complex specifically designed and marketed as the future of luxury shopping. The retail problem was serious. The office problem was even bigger. Hudson Yards was built around the daily movement of corporate employees. Thousands of workers were expected to arrive every morning, eat in the restaurants, shop during breaks, meet clients in the hotels, visit bars after work, and fill the plazas throughout the day. These workers were supposed to become the district's population. Then the pandemic changed how offices were used. Remote and hybrid work became normal for many companies. Employees returned, but often only 2 or 3 days per week. That shift affected all Manhattan office districts, but Hudson Yards was especially vulnerable. Older neighborhoods have multiple sources of life. Chelsea has long-term residents, galleries, restaurants, schools, shops, bars, and businesses that existed before the newest office towers. The West Village has families, tourists, apartment buildings, independent stores, and generations of history. Even when office attendance declines, these neighborhoods continue functioning. Hudson Yards had been designed in the opposite direction. Its residential population was relatively small and extremely wealthy. Its stores focused more on destination shoppers than daily necessities. It had luxury restaurants but few ordinary neighborhood businesses. There was no large community of residents supporting dry cleaners, corner stores, inexpensive cafes, laundromats, or local services. Without office workers, Hudson Yards could become almost silent. The leases still existed. Major corporations had not necessarily abandoned their buildings. But an office tower can be technically occupied while remaining far below capacity on a normal weekday. That difference matters. Signed leases can support the financial value of a building. They cannot automatically create street life. 50 Hudson Yards opened in 2022, with BlackRock as its major tenant, in a market completely different from the one developers had imagined. The original business model assumed that employees would fill these towers 5 days a week. Instead, Hudson Yards entered an era when many desks remained empty for much of the week. The district had built its entire identity around a population that was no longer required to appear every day. The residential towers faced their own problems. 35 Hudson Yards was supposed to become the luxury crown of the development. The building combined expensive condominiums, an Equinox fitness club, and the Equinox Hotel. The hotel opened in 2019 with room rates beginning at roughly $700 per night. Its concept focused on performance, wellness, sleep, nutrition, and high-end fitness. The product itself was not necessarily a failure. Guests often reviewed it positively, and the hotel continued operating. But the condominiums were more difficult. Homes in the building were marketed for several $1 million, with penthouses reaching prices above $30 million. Those prices depended on the assumption that Hudson Yards would quickly become as prestigious as Central Park South, the West Village, or Billionaire's Row. But those neighborhoods offer something that cannot be included in a new construction budget: history. Luxury buyers in established areas are not purchasing only square footage and amenities. They are purchasing reputation, architecture, culture, streets, restaurants, familiarity, and a sense of place created over decades. Hudson Yards offered newness instead. When Manhattan's luxury housing market softened, that newness became a weakness. Some units remained unsold longer than expected. Others were repriced. The apartments had beautiful views and expensive finishes. What they lacked was an established neighborhood identity strong enough to justify the original premium. The Shed was created partly to solve that identity problem. The Arts Center featured a giant movable shell that could extend over the plaza, creating a flexible performance space unlike almost anything else in New York. Its programming included visual art, music, theater, and experimental performances. The building was architecturally ambitious, and much of its work was genuinely respected. But the Shed also exposed the difficulty of using one cultural institution to give an entire corporate development a soul. It depended on earned revenue, donations, public funding, and favorable lease arrangements. In 2022, it underwent financial restructuring, reduced programming, and cut staff. The problem was larger than the Shed itself. Culture cannot simply be installed like an escalator or an observation deck. A real cultural district develops through affordable spaces, independent artists, small venues, local audiences, unusual businesses, and years of experimentation. Hudson Yards had culture as a feature. It did not yet have culture as an ecosystem. This is why the streets could feel so strange. Everything was clean. Everything was controlled. Everything was professionally designed. There were few accidents, few layers, and little evidence of ordinary life. No restaurant that had survived for 40 years. No crowded bodega serving the same residents every morning. No aging apartment block beside a new tower. No cheap bar, family-owned laundromat, street vendor, or independent store disrupting the polished image. Hudson Yards had many of the objects associated with a neighborhood. It did not have the history that connects those objects. A neighborhood is not just a collection of buildings. It is the result of thousands of people making decisions over time. People move in. Businesses fail. New communities arrive. Old buildings are reused. Traditions form. Conflicts reshape streets. Unexpected places become important. Hudson Yards attempted to compress that entire process into a development schedule. $25 billion could build towers, platforms, parks, shops, and attractions. It could not instantly create belonging. That does not mean everything at Hudson Yards failed. Its engineering was extraordinary. The subway extension brought valuable transit access to the far west side. The office towers secured major tenants. BlackRock established a genuine corporate anchor. The Equinox Hotel continued operating. Edge attracted tourists. Restaurants and stores remained open. Hudson Yards was not abandoned, but it was also not the revolutionary neighborhood its developers originally promised. The language gradually changed. Instead of presenting Hudson Yards as a complete new community, it became easier to describe it as a business district, a luxury destination, or a tourist attraction. The unfinished second phase revealed how fragile the larger vision had become. Rising interest rates, weakness in the commercial office market, uncertainty in luxury housing, and the enormous cost of constructing another platform delayed the western portion of the development. Roughly half of the original dream remained incomplete. The first phase stood above the tracks. The full neighborhood did not, and that is the real collapse of Hudson Yards. Not the collapse of steel or concrete. The collapse of an idea, the idea that enough money could reproduce Manhattan without reproducing the conditions that made Manhattan successful. Hudson Yards copied the skyline. It copied the luxury, the ambition, the architecture, and the spectacle. But it could not copy the decades of human activity that turned buildings into a place. The offices are there. The hotel is open. Some apartments are occupied. Tourists visit Edge. Vessel operates under restrictions. Neiman Marcus is gone. The streets remain clean, controlled, and often surprisingly quiet. Hudson Yards may continue to grow. New residents may eventually arrive. Future construction may give the area more schools, housing, public space, and everyday businesses. Over time, it may become something closer to a real neighborhood. But that possibility only proves the lesson the original project tried to avoid. Cities cannot be completed on opening day. They have to accumulate. They need ordinary people, mixed incomes, daily routines, mistakes, history, conflict, and time. Hudson Yards spent $25 billion proving that developers can build almost anything above a working rail yard. Anything except an instant neighborhood.